In Reform Text, you can work in two different modes. Basic mode, which is how we've been working so far, and there's also variable height mode, where you can create effects like this. But in this video, we'll be working in basic mode so that we can look at all of the options in this top section of the Reform Text panel, and we'll cover variable height in the next video. First, we have the margin fields, which we looked at in the last video, and which allow us to control the left and right margins on either side of the delimiters. Next, we have the scaling field, and if I change this, for example, to 200%, we can see the text begins to scale vertically between those margins, those delimiters. So text scaling is a function of both the scaling percentage and the amount of space that you have between the delimiters. So you can work back and forth between those settings to achieve the proportions that you want for your text. And here's a shortcut. You can reset the margin back to 0 by double-clicking on a delimiter like this. And we can see that reflected on the panel here. Now let's go back to 100% scaling, and we'll look at the row of alignment buttons. And these are just as you would expect. We have left alignment, center alignment, and right alignment. Then these three buttons are for justifying the text. The first reflows, spaces, and scales the text to fit exactly inside the delimiters. The next button, Justify and Scale, does this too, but it maintains the original proportions of the type. So I like to use this as a reset so I can get back to the original type proportions no matter how I have the delimiters set. Now currently, I'm working with one line of point text. So let's switch to an area text example and we can really see the difference between the three Justify buttons. Here's the first, Justify Text, which reflows the text and adjusts the spacing so that the lines fit exactly within the delimiters. Then there's Justify Text and Scale, which scales the text to fit between the delimiters. And then we have Justify by Horizontal Scaling, which scales the text horizontally, but not vertically, until it fits exactly within the delimiters. And in Illustrator, you can't use the Type on a Path tool with area text. So what we've been looking at here is something unique to working with Reform Text. Now we'll go back to the point text example, and we'll look at this vertical checkbox. Normally, each character stays perpendicular to the path, but when I check the vertical checkbox, the text is now sheared, and each character is at the same angle, so they're now perpendicular to the bottom of the artboard. And that's due to this angle setting here, which by default is 90 degrees. When I change this to 60, we can see how the angle of the text changes, and if I uncheck the box, we get back to the default, where the characters are just following the direction of the path. We also have three corner settings here, which I'll demonstrate on some text that's flowing along a path with hard corners like this. And we can change from a mitered corner to a rounded corner or to a beveled corner. And I'll change this back to rounded where it's most legible. Next, we'll move to another example where we have a really dramatic curve, and we can look at these buttons which control the position of the text in relation to the path. By default, the baseline of the text is sitting directly on the path, but I can change that to center it on the path. Or I can align it to the ascenders of the type or the descenders. And adjustments like this give you a very visual way of finding an option that works best for the curvy path that you have. From here, I can make further adjustments by adding some offset, just some distance between the baseline and the path, which softens it a bit. And then finally, to change how this type is distorting along that curve, we have curve correction. So I'm going to lower this number, and as I do this, you can see how the text changes as it dips into a dramatic downward curve like this. It gets less compressed as I lower the number, and then it gets a little more compressed as it spreads over the top of the curves. So now we've covered the top section of the panel. In the next video, we'll look at the options at the bottom of the panel for working in variable height mode.